Kellogg to Kiev, Witkoff to Moscow, Trump to dispatch envoys to Ukraine, Russia as deadline looms. We'll talk about this with political analyst, European Leadership Network, UK member Alexandra Filippenko. Alexandra, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Alexandra, US President Donald Trump has said that Steve Witkoff, his special envoy for the Middle East, is likely to visit Russia on the 6th or the 7th of August. How does the timing of Witkoff's visit coinciding with Trump's deadline for Russia to accept a ceasefire reflect Washington's diplomatic intent or leverage?
This is a part of what President Trump is now doing as a part of his campaign, let's say, to move Putin to the negotiation table, but in the end, to at least ceasefire. Right now, it's difficult to talk about some peace agreement, but at least a ceasefire. As President Trump has said many times, they should stop shooting. So that stopping the shooting is something to the effect of a ceasefire. And we are seeing Mr. Witkoff's visit as this third part of the whole, let's say, strategy of President Trump, because let's look at those other parts. There is a diplomatic part, obviously, because Marco Rubio, a state secretary, has said to some journalists that there are contacts, there are some kind of negotiation, not negotiation per se, but some kind of contacts with Russian counterparts, with some representatives of the Putin regime. Then we are seeing this, let's say, rather important situation with the submarines, the Ohio-class submarines, talking about nuclear-powered submarines. Those submarines are being repositioned closer to Russia. So military part of that strategy. And now there's Steve Witkoff. Steve Witkoff, as we've seen before, traveled to Russia, talked to Putin, talked to his representatives many times. And I think with some degree of certainty, we can say that he's always been discussing business deals or something connected to business or something connected to possibilities of, let's say, signing deals with Russia. Regards of the Arctic region, or regards some minerals, like mineral deals with Russia, regarding other issues that might be of interest for the United States. We can say that most probably it's been business, because when you come to negotiate on the war and peace, you mainly or generally would come with your own interpreter. But as we've learned, Mr. Witkoff traveled to Russia, and not only without his own interpreter, but moreover, he didn't use the interpreter from the embassy. Of course, the U.S. Embassy in Russia, although due to some restrictions by the Russian government, of course, the embassy is not fully, is not filled to its full capacity right now. But definitely, we understand there are interpreters that work for the U.S. Embassy in Russia. So he didn't have an interpreter. He used the interpreter of the Kremlin. So when you talk about war and peace, you generally need an interpreter. If you talk about business, if you're talking business deals, if you're talking oil and gas, yeah, you can have someone else's interpreter, or you can have your friend, Kirill Dmitriev, translate for you. That's what Mr. Witkoff had. So we can draw the conclusion that those were business negotiations. And I believe that this is part of that strategy by President Trump of bringing Putin to the negotiation table and to ceasefire, because Mr. Witkoff's main goal, I believe, is to explain to the Russian counterparts what will happen after the deadline is over, and what will happen if the Russian counterparts come to negotiate and come to the ceasefire. So he will talk about great opportunities, great possibilities, and great pressure from the U.S. side. At the same time, as the diplomatic negotiations continue, or contacts, at least contacts, that's what Marco Rubio said, and the military pressure is mounting with those nuclear-powered submarines, the Ohio-class submarines. So I believe that Mr. Witkoff's main goal, is to be part of this strategy, be part of this plan by President Trump, be part of this pressure on Russia to explain what is going to happen after the deadline of 10 days. Right now, 10 days used to be 50, when it's going to be over.
We see that Kit Kellogg may visit Ukraine in the coming days, Kyiv Post reports, and according to the outlets, sources, the visit by the U.S. Special Envoy could take place ahead of the deadline set by Trump for Putin, and it coincides with the planned trip to Russia by Steve Witkoff, another envoy of the U.S., as we said. What specific objectives might Kit Kellogg pursue during his upcoming visit to Ukraine, especially given the approaching ceasefire deadline set by Donald Trump?
For Kit Kellogg, of course, it is important to see what's going on the ground, let's say. And also, as we've seen before, since Putin loves to show off and loves to show that that no pressure can be put on him and that nothing touches him, this is also a way to make sure that Russian Russian side knows that President Trump's representative is right now in Kyiv. After all those attacks that we've been seeing, after all those attacks, the record-breaking attacks, the sadly and catastrophically record-breaking attacks, it seems to me that for all those 6 months that President Trump has been in power, we've been every week or every day, we've been hearing the record-breaking attack, and there is another record-breaking attack. But when there is a U.S. representative in Kyiv, at least we see a little bit less of Russia's drones and rockets flying into Ukraine. So maybe this is also a way to, let's say, make sure the Russian side knows who is in Kyiv right now. But for Kit Kellogg, it's also very important to see what is going on the ground. And I believe, of course, as we understand, Steve Witkoff and Kit Kellogg can have some back channels. They can communicate through some back channels, and they can communicate, for example, through the embassies, through if they need to. If there is this light at the end of the tunnel, if there is this opportunity for a ceasefire, and they would need to talk immediately. They would need to exchange some information immediately and to communicate immediately. It's better to have both representatives in the respective cities, of course, in Moscow and in Kyiv, to communicate. And if there is this opportunity, if there is this possibility of ceasefire, to immediately negotiate it right there and then, not to postpone it until everyone comes back to Washington. No, negotiate it right there and then. So there is some, let's say, optimism, I believe, on the American side, although I must say that I am rather pessimistic with this opportunity or possibility, but the pressure is getting higher and higher from the American side. This gives optimism. The economic pressure gives optimism, of course, but at least there is a hope. And maybe if, as they say in the US, if there is a hope, there is a way. Maybe there is a way that we don't know of, because as Marco Rubio said, those communications are continuing. So hopefully we just don't know the whole picture, let's say.
About another possible visit, Donald Trump may travel to China while Putin is there. Serbian President Alexandra Vučić has said, according to him, there is a possibility that the US president will arrive in Beijing to take part in events marking the 80th anniversary of the end of the World War II. What could be the geopolitical implications if Donald Trump and dictator Vladimir Putin were to meet in Beijing?
Well, actually, it all boils down to one thing. There is only one issue that can be discussed by President Trump and Vladimir Putin if they are not talking about Ukraine, and it's nuclear weapons. And we should, let's say, look at the situation as it is. That's the reality of the situation, that unfortunately, because of or due to the Soviet Union, Russia has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons. And in 2026, in February 2026, the New START Treaty comes to an end. The New START Treaty is it's the last remaining arms control agreement between the United States and Russia. It's the last nuclear arms control agreement between US and Russia. It limits both sides to 105,050 nuclear warheads. It limits both sides to 700 deployed nuclear missiles and 800 launchers. And most importantly, it includes on-site inspections, it includes data sharing, and most importantly, it also includes non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And this is the last agreement between the United States and Russia on nuclear weapons and on non-proliferation of those nuclear weapons. It all ends in February 2026. President Trump, during his first term, already, he had said that it would be wise to include China into the new agreement, the new START Treaty. It would be wise to have China as a part of that treaty. President Trump has talked about it during his first term. So if we really will see China, the US and Russia coming to the table, most probably it's going to be only and exclusively about nuclear weapons, because China is also a big nuclear power. Of course, Russia has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons. Then comes the United States, then comes China, and they're very low on the number of their warheads are Great Britain and France. But the main, let's say, number of weapons is in Russia and the United States. So President Trump wants to bring Beijing to the table. This is the only thing, this is the only point of discussion for Trump with Russia as of now, if we don't take into account Ukraine. So we should really look at the situation as is. And we should know that, yes, President Trump can and might discuss nuclear weapons with Russia without mentioning Ukraine. Sadly, but true, he can do that because these are two separate issues, just the same as, for example, right now, just recently, there's been a meeting between NASA and Roscosmos talking about the International Space Station, talking about the exploration, space exploration, et cetera, So there is that point, but of course, this is not a point for presidents to discuss, but this is a point of discussion of possible cooperation when they really, and we should know about it, they do not include Ukraine into that discussion, and nuclear weapons is the other thing. So that meeting in early September might take place, and the discussion might take place about nuclear weapons. Of course, Putin wants it. Putin dreams of that. This is all he wants. He wants to be seen together with Trump, together with Xi Jinping. He wants to be there, of course, and he'll try to do everything. And that is why why President Trump is rushing. That is why President Trump is putting that much pressure on Putin on different fronts. He's putting pressure, as we've said, with Marco Rubio, diplomatic pressure. He's putting pressure with submarines, Ohio-class submarines, nuclear submarines. That's the military pressure. And he's putting pressure with Steve Witkoff. That's the business, let's say, business financial pressure. So there is this possibility that they will meet in Beijing, but most probably the discussion, if they're not discussing Ukraine, and for President Trump, it would be unacceptable to discuss Ukraine if there is no ceasefire, if there is no peace plan, if there is no peace agreement. No, he won't discuss it. The only point of discussion for them might be nuclear weapons. And this is actually a big, big issue because in reality, if this New START treaty just expires, if it just expires without a new one, without a new agreement between the biggest nuclear powers, we should look at it as is. If it just expires, the world will be left without restrictions on nuclear weapons, without restrictions on proliferation of nuclear weapons. And doesn't this bring Khamenei and Iran into our minds, or anyone to that effect who wants to get nuclear weapons? So this is actually quite disturbing, let's say. So this might be a point of discussion in Beijing.
You mentioned China, and the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that it has no plans to revise its energy policy due to external pressure, in particular to the US calls to stop buying oil from Russia and Iran, according to Associated Press. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says in a statement that China will always ensure its energy supply in ways that serve our national interest. It's quote, also pressuring will not achieve anything. China will firmly defend its sovereignty, security, and development interests. What leverage, if any, does the United States have to persuade China to reduce energy imports from Russia and Iran?
Well, I think right now for Putin for Putin, China is the main, of course, buyer of anything that Russia can sell and the main supplier of goods. So for Putin, China is very important, of course, extremely important. But for President Trump, I believe that this is not the main point right now. He wants China not to buy oil from Russia, not to buy cheap resources from Russia. But President Trump has also someone else on his mind. He has India on his mind. Right now, I believe that those threats to India is a negotiating tactic. That's a negotiating tactic to put pressure on India, to make India buy cheap resources or resources, not from Russia, but from someone else. India has already started exploring where they can buy oil from, although the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of India is also, just as China, they have said that they will not, they are against any pressure. They will buy oil from whoever they deem necessary, and they are totally independent in their energy policy. So India is not also is just waiting and seeing what steps Trump takes. But I believe that for President Trump right now, China is not the main, let's say, goal. India is right now, because with China, as you've said, it's very difficult to see if there's any leverage that Trump can use. He doesn't really, using President Trump's language, he doesn't really have the cards. There are no cards to play with India. I don't believe that he can play, let's put it this way, hardball with India, actually. With China. With India, on the other hand, there are some possibilities, because right now they are negotiating. There is a negotiation, the trade negotiation between the United States and India, And the United States, for India, the United States have the cards. For China, the United States, I don't believe that they have the cards to pressure China. So that is what I believe President Trump is doing. He's trying to make China the only buyer of Russian resources, the only. And wouldn't that remind you of a situation with North Korea? This is exactly what China and North Korea relations are like. China is buying everything it can from everything that North Korea can sell. China is buying, and China is supplying everything to North Korea. Everything China can supply to North Korea, China is supplying. So wouldn't that be the same? Wouldn't that be the same dynamic? Wouldn't that be the same situation? Because right now, with this trade deal with the European Union, the trade deal that President Trump has signed with Ursula von der Leyen just recently, they announced it with Ursula von der Leyen just recently while, let's say, President Trump has also been playing golf in Scotland. So they've announced that the European Union, up until 2029, will have to buy. This is part of the agreement. They will have to buy resources, energy resources from the United States to $750 billion. $750 billion of resources. So we understand that even if all sanctions are lifted off of Russia, there will be no place for Russia in Europe. Because Europe, according to the agreement of the United States with the European Union, will just have to buy. Europe will have to buy from the US. This is what President Trump wants with every other country that is buying Russian resources. This is the way Trump will leave China and Russia one-on-one. And then he will have the cards. Then I believe he will have the leverage and to put pressure on China. Right now, no. But soon he might, if other countries, first of all India, then Brazil, and then Turkey, if they will move on to buying resources from other countries under pressure from the United States, then this will leave China and Russia one-on-one, and this will leave China as the only buyer of Russian resources, and that would mean the pressure. But as of now, I suppose, I don't know how President Trump will play it, but I suppose that he will try to avoid putting pressure on China right now, eyeing that opportunity down the line where he will be able to put pressure on China when China is the only buyer of Russian resources.
Alexandra, thank you very much for taking the time to participate in this interview. We greatly appreciate your insights and expertise, your thoughts. A political analyst, European Leadership Network UK member Alexandra Filippenko was with us today. Thank you so much, and thanks to our audience. See you.